live. Now let's see when it takes a hold over here. Tonight we're looking at chapter 5 in the Gospel of Luke. The disciples are called. Luke 5, 1 through 3 starts out and says, "So it was, as the multitude pressed on about him to hear the word of God, that he stood by the lake of Gennesaret and saw two boats standing by the lake. But the fishermen had gone from them and were washing their nets. Then he got into one of the boats, which was Simon's, and asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the multitudes from the boat." Now, we are continuing on with what has been happening in the, through Luke's eyes, the version that he has for us. And so this is one of the times that Jesus was preaching. And if you, I think I've told you before, the Sea of Tiberias, the Sea of Gethsemane, Lake of Gethsemane, Lake of Gennesaret, Lake of Tiberias, Sea of Galilee. They all call it the same. What the lady explained, or somebody explained to us, a sea, an inland sea, is salty. Well, this is not salty, so it's a lake, even though it's a big lake. It's like 13 miles from north to south and 7 miles east to west. So it's a big lake. And they just call it that because that's what at the version, just like you call it a pond or you call it a lake. We have an 11-acre pond, I think, in our neighborhood, but they call it a lake. Well, yeah, it's pretty big, but it's not real big. It's not a lake in any occasion, but anyway, that's what they're calling it. And the different names, they have Gennesaret, they have Galilee, and Tiberias. And it goes by Tiberias today. Most of the time you look on a map and it'll show Tiberias is a town also, but it's Lake Tiberias. Jesus was preaching, and he preached out here close to the lake because it's down. Normally on a lake, you approach it and it slopes down into the water. Okay? Same way here for the most part. But you're actually, and I think it says in here, 700 feet below sea level. So, and in some places it's pretty steep. It's because they go up quite. You actually cross over going to Tiberias. You cross over, you go higher than the sea elevation, and then you go back down into it as you go around that area. It's a little unique what they put out there. But the disciples were, and the way that this explains it, I've read several commentaries on it. This is the third time that he's called some of the disciples. If you put them in order, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, put them all there, and how they called them in different orders, it's like very first of his ministry, they called, Simon, Peter, and Andrew, and then James and John. Well, here it's like, he's already done some miracles. Well, they were there when they were called back in the first, and they were following him around, but they had gone back to fishing. They haven't started following him yet. Okay, that's the way they acknowledge it. Because if we remember, Andrew was a follower, we believe, was one of the followers of John the Baptist. And he was still following him whenever he'd come around in an area. Andrew and Philip, another disciple, they would follow Jesus, or follow John, and listen to his teachings. Well, at the baptism, of course, he said, "One's coming that's greater than I." So after that, they started watching Jesus and following him. So that's where it brings it up here, and that's he knew him already. That's why he called him. It was Simon's boat. They had gone ashore, they'd fished, and they fish all night, because in the night there, and even fishing here, nighttime is a lot of times better. In the day it's hot, fish go deep. In the nighttime they come up and it's cooler, so they can feed up in the hot. And that's Simon had, and his crew, Simon, and it doesn't say Andrew was here, but it says another boat. And later on we'll hear that boat's James and John. They were kind of together in this business. They were out fishing. They came in, and it's time to go to bed or go sleep for a while because they was up all night. But before they do that, they clean their nets. They have to bring the nets in, make sure they're not tore, make sure they got buoys on them, make sure all these things, they have to mend them so they're ready to go out the next day. It's like anything else. If you have something and when you get ready to go fishing, unless you just have it right there in your truck or car, you have to get the poles down, you have to get your fishing tackle, you have to go buy some bait, you have to do this, you have to make sure you got your license, and go fishing then. But they're wanting to go because they're probably going to go out the next night and go again. So they want to make everything ready. And that's what he had done. And the boats was there on the shore. Jesus got in the boat and he asked Simon, can you put me out a little bit? You go out on a lake, and we've talked about this before, you can hear on a lake real well. Somebody's talking across the shore, and you're like, who is that? Well, it's them people over there. You can hear them talking just plain as day. The sound is bouncing off the water. And so you can hear, it's like an amplification. And that's one reason why Jesus, it also tells us here that they were washing, he stood by Gennesaret, the multitude pressed him. Okay, they were coming in closer and closer. And as he was doing these miracles, they started wanting him to do more miracles. He was wanting to start preaching, but they wanted him to do miracles. So they're trying to get close to him. So he said, put me in, let me get in your boat and put out a little bit because I want to teach. Far enough out that they're not going to try to swim out to the boat, So that's what he did. So they sat down and he taught them. So he sat down. Here again, we talked about last week, or week 4, about teaching. That's the way they taught. They would sit down and teach a little bit. Some people would ask questions. They may go back and forth, and then Jesus would, teach some more, and they go on back and forth. We see that even in the scriptures, because the scribes and the Pharisees, they'd ask him a question. Oh, what about this? Or what about that? And he would go about and teaching them. So that's what he's wanting to do here, and he was wanting to do. And they was trying to get across to them what was going on. Okay? Brother Epson, you want to read, get this up a little closer so she can hear. 4 through 5, they're at the bottom of page 1.
When he had stopped speaking, he said, launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch. But Simon answered and said to him, Master, we have toiled all night and caught nothing. Nevertheless, at your word, I will let down the net.
Okay. Now, what was Jesus' occupation? He's a carpenter's son. And that means more than what we think today. We think of a wood carpenter, but it could be stonemason, things like that. He worked with his hands, and he worked with different materials. The Greek or the Hebrew that they have in there seems to indicate it could be either one. Okay, he could work with both, no problem. But that was his vocation or his learning. What was Simon's vocation? He's a fisherman. Okay, you're a carpenter telling me that you want me to go fish now. I fished all night, didn't get nothing, and you're telling me to go back out now? I'm tired. I want to go to bed. He didn't say that, did he? He said, okay, let's go. He told him, we was out there all night, but okay, if you want to go, we'll go. So he was in the boat with them, so they pushed out onto the deep, go far out. And as we said, Tiberias is in a big valley is what it is. You got mountains on both sides. That's why it's so steep, and it goes down into it. So it gets deep pretty quick. You don't have to get too far from shore to be really deep. And so he launched out, went out out, doesn't tell us how far, but he went out and they let down the nets, it says, okay? Iris, do you want to read for us 6 and 7 at the bottom of 2?
And when they had done this, they caught a great number of fish, and their net was breaking. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both the boats so that they began to sink.
Okay. Now these were not little rowboats like we think of. These were bigger, you know, I don't know how large they were, but they were a big enough boat that they would navigate and be able to take some of the rough waters that's out on that lake. And I don't know, we went out on a boat, and I can't remember how long it was. It's probably 50 feet, maybe. Pretty good sized boat, but you know, it's not real, I don't know if theirs was that big, but it was big enough at least for 2 or maybe 4 people to be in it and still work. Be able to get around and get the nets in and pull them in and have room to store the fish. So they went out, dropped the nets. Soon as they says, you know, they dropped the nets and they started pulling them under almost. And they gathered up, and it was so many fish. Now what they do, they have a net that they throw out. I don't know if you've seen them. It's like we call seining for minnows. You throw out a big net, it's weighted on around the sides, and it falls down, and then you pull it back with a rope, and the rope, it kind of closes around the bottom, and you pull it up, and it has your minnows in it that you may want to get if you don't, you know, if you don't want to. If you're going to be fishing a lot, you get one of those. Otherwise, you go to Walmart and buy them. Or whatever, the fish store. But they had done that, and they brought that in, and it was so many fish, they couldn't even get it in. 2 of them was trying, and they couldn't even get them in. So they hollered at their partners, which it doesn't name them here, but in the previous ones, it names them as James and John. They were in the other boat. They came back out, filled up that boat. 2 boats full of fish. And they're sinking because it's so many fish. And this was a miracle that they had just seen. The disciples, this was for them an aha moment, I guess. This changed their mind. This guy that knew nothing about fishing told us to go fish, and he was right. Now you can look at it 2 ways. It's coincidence, or he told them fish to swim into the net. And that's, to me, what happened. And they had so much that it, you know, it was a surprise to them, it seems like, to the 4 that was there. Okay, Tammy, on the next page, page 4, starts at 8.
When Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knee, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish which they had taken, and so also were James and John, the son of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid, from now on you will catch men." So when they had brought their boats to land, they forsook all and followed him.
Okay. It's such a aha moment, like I said, such a revelation, light bulb moment, however you want to call it, that Peter realizes right then. You know, he may have been, like we talked before, he may have met Jesus before on these occasions back and forth. But here it's like, you said it happened, and I'm ready to believe. He saw what was in him. He said, you are the Messiah. You're the one doing all this. That's kind of the different words that it goes through in all the different testaments. But he is saying, you were the ones. He was astonished. All of them were astonished at them. And Jesus calmly said, you're not going to catch fish anymore. You're going to catch men. You're going to be fishers of men. That's what he told him. And it says they departed and followed him. It tells us a little bit about James and John. His father, Zebedee, was also in the fishing business with them. But it says here that they followed him. That means they left their boat, they left the fish, they left the nets, and they followed Jesus. They were so touched, so ministered to right then, that they decided, this is the guy. This is the one that we wanted for years and years and years. We dreamed of this. And Peter realized that as that, he is the Son of Man, the Son of God. And he's a sinful man. So he is saying, depart from me. Not that he doesn't want to be near him. He's saying, I'm not worthy to even be near you. That's what Peter is saying here. Said Peter knew that Jesus was Lord. He knew he was man. Peter knew he was a sinful man. Peter let this make him an humble man. That's what it takes sometimes for us to understand what's going on. Because like he said, he was the one, he's a fisherman. He should have known what was going on and be able to catch these, but he didn't. Jesus was the one who told him what to do. They forsook all and followed him. This seems to mean that they left the miraculous catch of fish behind because it was not as important as what it showed them about Jesus. It showed them that Jesus was much more than a carpenter, and this caused them to follow him. Now, I'm sure that they didn't leave it. Hopefully, James and John Zebedee came along and got the fish. It didn't go out, but Jesus was trying to show them what was going on. It says the word follow is a technical term in Luke for discipleship, especially in 18:22 through 28. As such, it is similar in nature to his term in Acts for following Christ, the way. And it talks to us in several scriptures there about the way. And we're just seeing several little snippets, okay, in this chapter tonight. So when we move on, and we see this also in another one of the epistles, and it tells us it's in Capernaum. It doesn't say that here, but it does in the others. And Capernaum is real close to Lake Tiberias, so it makes sense. Darla, you're on the top of 6, I'm sorry. Okay. We've talked about the leprosy before, that this is different than what the leprosy of today that we have. It's a different type. This is one, and you can read through this, it's pretty graphic in some cases. I mean, it's like when it starts, it just starts eating away at your flesh and your bones. That sometimes your hand will fall off after a while, your nose will fall off, ears, whatever. It's a disease that affects the skin, but it also affects them too. What happens is when they get that, they have to, and typically the Pharisees or the priests, Moses showed them a way to check for leprosy. It was very involved. We went through that when we went through Deuteronomy and Exodus. They've got to examine it, and if it's a certain color, it's okay. If it's not, then you got to come back 6 days or 7 days later and check it again. And if it's spreading, you got to do something else. And if it's all this, something else. So it's a very great disease. But the priest didn't do it very much because not very many people got healed. Okay, once you got it, it was basically your death sentence, because there was no cure for it at that time. And depending on how bad you were, the people with the disease, the people you had to call out when you had leprosy, unclean, unclean. And you had to stay, they said 2 meters, 6 feet away from people. Couldn't approach them, couldn't, come on them because they were afraid that they would get leprosy from it, which may happen. I don't know how it's transmitted. It doesn't really say in here. But it said, according to the Jewish law and customs, one had to keep 6 feet from a leper. If the wind blew toward a person from a leper, they had to be 150 feet away. That's a long ways. The only thing more defiling than contact with the leper was contact with a dead body. So to them, you are a dead body. You're decaying. Okay? They don't want any part of that. That indicates sin in their mind. They went across that, talked about that when we went back and studied Moses. So, and it says here, these reasons leprosy was considered a picture of sin and its effect. It is contagious, it's debilitating, corrupts its victim, and makes him essentially dead while still alive. Therefore, society and religious people scorned lepers. They had to stay out of villages. They couldn't come into the town. Most of the time, they had a little tribe together themselves because the lepers was the only ones that would get close to other lepers, and they were usually outside. Remember the story that they had the 3 lepers was coming upon when there was a war going on and they were fighting, I'd have to go back and look now who it was, but Israelites was fighting a nation, and I think they were attacking Jerusalem at the time. I think it's Hezekiah. But anyway, they went up there and God had already intervened. And the army had left, had fled. Israelites didn't know that. They were still thinking that they were going to... And the lepers went in and they'd left their tents, they'd left everything in play. The soldiers had left. And the lepers started just eating and drinking and, putting stuff on and everything. They had, this is a good old time. They said, we're not doing right. We need to go in and tell the Israelites the army's gone so they can also get some of the spoil. And they did. But that was 3 lepers, all right, that did that because they were out wandering around. They couldn't be in the town themselves. Said all through this, even though Jesus knew all this about the lepers, he knew how terrible this problem was. He knew that most everyone thought this condition was hopeless. He had no one who would or could take him to Jesus. The leper didn't. He had no previous experience or example of Jesus healing a leper to give him hope. It doesn't tell us any of that up to now. He had no invitation from Jesus or his disciples. And most of the time it says that they felt ashamed and alone, even in a crowd, because the crowd would make way for him. In The Chosen, when we watched it, the one guy was trying to sell his tools and he was trying to hide it, because they wouldn't even take his tools because he was the one that they showed. He was like a craftsman, and he laid his tools out, and the guy was giving him ridiculous prices for it. I mean, it wasn't next to nothing, but he reached for it. He said, "Oh, I'll just take it back." And then he saw his leprosy, and he started yelling, "Unclean, unclean, get out of here, I don't want you." And that's what it was to them. It was a death sentence. They couldn't work. They couldn't do anything to help themselves. So basically, they gathered around in there. Now, what did the leper say to Jesus? If you are willing. He didn't say, can you do it? He already had that faith that he could do it. But he said, if you are willing. It says in verse 13, then he put out his hand and touched him, something nobody would ever do to a leper. But he said, I am willing, be cleansed. And immediately the leprosy left him. I mean, you're talking about, don't know how bad it was, but his nose could have been eat off or anything like that. And then he was just whole. You talk about the disciples looking at that, it's like, wow. I've never seen anything like that. And Jesus, we see this in several of the healings. He's told them before, but he tells them again, don't tell anyone. Brother Epperson, 14.
Says that he charged him to tell no one. Go and show yourself to the priest and make an offering for your cleansing as a testimony to him, just as Moses commanded.
Okay. Jesus wanted him to be able to get back into civilization, get back into people, get back and live his life. Go back to living his life again. In order to do that, if they knew that you were a leper, it's like nobody gets healed from that. So they wouldn't want to be around you. So Jesus tells him, go do what Moses said to do. Go to the priests. Get examined. Offer your sacrifice. Do all these things, and then, you'll be able to continue your life. But he told him before that, tell no one what happened. He just wants to show them. So, and why do you think Jesus did that?
I don't think the timing was right.
His timing was not right. We see that with several, up until this time, the miracles that he had proposed or had done. And after this, there is a time, and it seems like it was the last year or so of his life, maybe a year and a half, somewhere in there, there's a transition to where he openly tells everyone who he is and what he wants. He doesn't want to get the people, what they're wanting is a Messiah king to come and overthrow Rome. And evidently he knew that because he didn't want that to happen right away. They would force him. In one place it tells him they would take him and force him to become king, to do all this. That wasn't what Jesus was sent to do. So that's why he tells him, go tell nobody. Don't tell anybody, but just go to the priest and get yourself examined. Down at the bottom it tells what the procedure is, again, back in Leviticus when we looked at that. 2 living clean birds, some cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop. They were brought for his cleansing. And then 2 lambs, 1 ewe, 3/10 of a deal of flour, and a log of oil. But if the person was poor, as we know, most of them were, they'd cut it down. You'd just bring 1 lamb, and 1/10 of a deal of flour, and a log of oil, and 2 turtle doves or young pigeons. So, whatever it is, he told them, go do what you can do. And since he was a leper, he probably didn't have much money. He did what best he could. And went and showed the priest, and the priest said, okay, bring me your sacrifice, and we'll go through the procedure. Iris, page 9, top of page 9.
However, the report went around concerning him all the more, and great multitudes came together to hear and to be healed by him of their infirmities. So he himself often withdrew into the wilderness and prayed.
Okay. He's still building him. I'm not saying building himself up, but he's a man. This takes a lot out of him to do some of the stuff that he's done. I'm not saying the miracles do, but the people constantly on him. I go up and down 169 and come back home, and I'm tired. I don't want to mess with them people no more. They're crazy, or anything like that. That's kind of what he was, feeling, that he took care of these people, but look, I got to have a break. So he withdrew himself, and he would go off, said often in the wilderness. We see sometimes he'd go to the garden when he was near Jerusalem. Here he would go off into the wilderness. And what he did was he prayed. But we see the guy couldn't keep his mouth shut. Okay, he told him to be quiet. The report went around concerning him all the more. It just sped. Anytime something good happens or unusual happens, people are going to spread it. Did you hear what happened to so-and-so? And they would, go on and tell them about it. And to me, it would be very hard not to do that. I mean, not to tell somebody. Because how many people get healed of leprosy? Not very many. Not at that time.
I was thinking the same thing. They probably didn't get very many except, have to worry too much about it because
Yeah. They just died. They didn't, they wasn't, yeah. So, and that's why I said that the priests, they probably had to go pull out the book of Moses and see what's going on and what do we do? Well, okay, we got to look here, we got to do this, do all that. Let's see, 17 through 19, Tammy?
Now it happened on a certain day, as he was teaching, that there were Pharisees and teachers of the law sitting by, who had come out of every town of Galilee, Judea, and Jerusalem. And the power of the Lord was present to heal them. And behold, men brought on the bed a man who was paralyzed. And they sought to bring in and lay before him. And when they could not find how they might bring him in because of the crowd, they went up to the housetop, let him down with his bed through the tiling into the midst of Jesus.
Okay. So again, is in a certain day, and again, we know it said they had come out, every town in Judea, Galilee, and Jerusalem. That's a big area. People were coming around. So he was teaching in a house this particular day. And it said the power of the Lord was present to heal them. So he was doing evidently some healing in this also and teaching. But he had this one man that was paralyzed. And since he was paralyzed, he couldn't come to him. So he had some friends bring him. Now, if he was one of those friends, it's like, I don't know if we want to be doing this, we can't even get in the door. There's so many people here. And there was also the scribes, calls them teachers of the law, which is what scribes are, and the Pharisees. They were there. They were listening to what was being taught at that particular time. But the friends had as much faith as the man did. Because they said, we got to get you in there somehow. We've heard this. We've seen what happened. We've got to get you in there. Now they said that at this particular time in this area, most of the houses had a roof that they would go up on in the summertime. And they would have kind of like our patio cover so they could sit up there because it was a lot cooler than down further. The wind was blowing and you could feel it. And that's probably what happened here. And most of the stairs that they had was outside the house. They wasn't inside. So it wouldn't be hard for them to get up on the roof. So they carried him up on the roof, and they say tiling here, but what they say most of the time it was kind of like if you've seen the old Western movie where you're in an adobe house and they have the logs across the top, at the very top of the adobe, and then they put mud and straw and stuff to keep the rain from coming in. That's the way I view it. I don't know if that's the way it was, but it kind of indicated in the other Gospels that that's what it was, similar, because they said they tore it open. They unroofed it is kind of the word that we would say in English. They unroofed it, and that's what, through the tiling, that's kind of what it meant. They opened up a hole so they could let their friend down in so Jesus could see him. That's some real friends, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
That's somebody that you want to be a friend with. Charles Spurgeon said, he spoke of the quality of men who would bring a friend to Jesus in such a way. They need to be strong, okay, to carry him, for the burden's heavy. They need to be resolute for the work, for they will try their faith. I mean, don't know how far a guy had to travel. That's a long ways to carry somebody. They need to be prayerful, for otherwise they labor in vain. They must be believing or they will be utterly useless. Yeah, if somebody's not believing, you don't need them. Okay, it's not happening there. Page 12, Darla, top 12.
When he saw their faith, he said to him, Man, her sins are forgiven you. And the scribes and the Pharisees began to reason, saying, Who is this who speaks blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone? And when Jesus perceived their thoughts, he answered and said to them, Why are you reasoning in your hearts?
Okay. So Jesus said, one of the things that they talk about, and it's asked several times through the Gospels, the different parts of the Gospels, some of them the same stories, why would this, it's not the story where they asked this, but it's the same thing. It was related, the scribes and the Pharisees and the learned people often took that sin was a result, infirmity was a result of sin that they had. So if they were paralyzed, or if they had something wrong with them, paralytic hand or anything like that, that's in the one case they asked, the disciples asked him, who sinned? You know, Father, this guy, or whatever, that he's in this way. It's not what he's saying here. But he is showing them, because that's what they thought. Okay, the scribes and the Pharisees, oh, this guy, why is he? He said, your sins are forgiven. He didn't tell them that he's going to be healed. Not right now. So the guy may oh, okay, I'm forgiven. Well, to them, what did that mean? Well, I got forgiven every year, once a year, you know. I went and gave him sacrifices and do this, so no big deal to him. But that's not what Jesus was meaning. I mean, yes, he was healed. He was forgiven, but it seems like to me it's a different forgiven than what they were thinking of. But Jesus, when he heard them, he perceived it in their thoughts even. They wasn't even saying it out loud, evidently. That he perceived what they were saying. They're like, okay, why are you saying this? Why, because, and we're going to talk about it in just a minute, about why are you working with these people that are sinners? Basically, is what he's saying. And he's answered, he said, why are you reasoning this in your hearts? Why aren't you believing? Is kind of what he's getting to. 23 says, which is easier to say? This is Jesus talking. Which is easier to say? Your sins are forgiven? Or to say, rise and up and walk? Rise up and walk. But that you may know the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins. He said to the man who was paralyzed, I say to you, rise, take up your bed, and go to your house. Immediately, he rose up before them, took up what he had been lying on, and departed to his own house, glorifying God. And they were all amazed, and they glorified God and were filled with fear, saying, we have seen strange things today. They were just totally blown away. Scribes and Pharisees just couldn't believe what had happened. And all the people around. Because Jesus had been healing like this. Lots of people there. It's hard to keep this down. Jesus' popularity is growing. But it's hard to keep it from going anywhere else. But the people, when they see that, they're just going bananas. He refers to him as the Son of Man. Why? It says the idea was not of the perfect man or the ideal man, or even the common man. Instead, it was a reference to Daniel 7, 3, and 14, where the coming of glory, coming to judge the world, the person has the title Son of Man. If you say Son of God, they think you're blaspheming. Okay? They think that you're taking on a title. If you say I'm king, then the Romans are going to come after you. So this is why he says Son of Man. And I don't think it says in this commentary, but in another one, it's used like 22 different times, okay, in the New Testament. Robertson on Son of Man says, Christ's favorite designation of himself was acclaimed to be the Messiah in terms that could not easily be attacked. And that's what all those others could. So he told them to rise, go take your bed and walk. Those words, he immediately rose. Jesus' power to heal and authority to forgive sins was immediately vindicated. He'd already told them your sins are forgiven. And they didn't really believe that. But then he turned around and he said, okay, rise up and walk. I have the authority to do both. That's what he's telling them. You didn't believe me the first time. But he could have left him like that. But because they weren't believing, he went ahead and healed the guy too. Okay, we skip to the next story. Brother Epperson, 27 through 28. Top
After
page.
these things, he went out and saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at the tax office. And he said to him, follow me. So he left off, rose up, and followed him.
Okay. If you do a comparison of the disciples' names through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, as we've said, Luke and Mark weren't disciples, but Matthew and John were. Well, Matthew, in the name of the disciples, calls himself Matthew. Here, Luke is calling him Levi. Well, that's okay. He, very common, even back then, to have two names. My name's Darrell Keith Duval. Got three names. Some people get upset about that. Well, Matthew, where's Matthew at? Was that Zacchaeus? Is it talking about Zacchaeus? No, it's a different one. This was the same man, Matthew. He was the one that he had taken a job as a Jewish citizen to tax the people. And we've talked about the taxing situation before, that it was not, the Jewish people did not like the tax collectors because they would take not only what was needed, but they would take more because that's the way they made their money. The more they taxed, they gave what was supposed to be given to whoever. This particular case, they were in Herod's district, so it went to Herod. Sometimes in different districts it'd go to Rome, exactly Rome. Herod was part of the Roman culture. I mean, he wasn't Roman himself, but he was the one in his district, so that's where the money went to. But they thought they were traitors. They were despised. They didn't want to be around anybody, but they were usually very rich. We see that in Zacchaeus when we read the story about Zacchaeus. We don't hear that much about Matthew, but here in just a minute we'll see a little bit more about him. And what does it say? He said to him, what? Follow me. Matthew didn't. He saw it, heard it, turned over, gave the keys to whoever, and said, I'm gone. To him, they would not allow him to come back. If this was not a good thing, okay, if Jesus' ministry didn't pan out, James and John, Peter and Andrew, they'd go back fishing. Matthew couldn't do that. He was going to be out of a job. He would be blacklisted, if you want to say it that way. So for him to turn around and follow Jesus right away, he's seen enough that he knows he's the one I want to follow. How much we know he saw, we don't know. It doesn't tell us that. We know he saw the whole book of Matthew because that's what he wrote. So he's seeing all these things, and he made that connection pretty quick. He was pretty wealthy. He was pretty knowledgeable, because otherwise they wouldn't let him be a tax collector, because he wouldn't, know how to handle money and things like that. Okay, Iris, page 16.
Then Levi gave him a great feast in his own house, and there were a great number of tax collectors and others who sat down with them. And their scribes and the Pharisees complained against his disciples, saying, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" Jesus answered and said to them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance."
Okay. What did Levi do? What did Matthew do? As soon as he followed him, he said, "Hey, come over to my house. I want to, have a dinner for you. I want to meet you. I want you to meet all my friends." Because those are the only friends he had, was the other tax collectors, because he didn't have a whole lot of other friends. So they went and they were complaining. The Pharisees saw this, Pharisees and the scribes, and they saw this, and they was complaining to Jesus' disciples. Why in the world is he going around with these sinners? And what do you think about? Does a doctor need to see the well person? No. He needs to see the people that are sick. And that's what Jesus was there for. He was for the sick people. Sick with sin. Okay? And that's what, to them, the Pharisees and the scribes, they knew the law, but they didn't follow the law in a lot of cases. Now we group those guys together, but we see a lot of them through here. We don't see a lot of them, but we see some of them that show us that not everybody was in accordance with all their following. Nicodemus, he had some questions about the way they were going through things. He questioned Christ. How do I become saved? How does this happen? Joseph of Arimathea, we don't have a whole lot on him, but we know he was also very wealthy, and he was one too that was probably part of the Sanhedrin. And he had his beliefs, okay? He was believing that he was who he said he was. So the disciples, Jesus answered him and said to him, even though he talked to the disciples, Jesus told them, "I don't need to go to the sick people. I mean, the sick people are the ones who need me. They're not the ones that, the doctor needs to see the sick people, not the good people." Okay, 33 to 39. It's kind of a long one there, Tammy.
Then they said to him, "Why do the disciples of John fast often and make prayers? And likewise those of the Pharisees, but yours eat and drink." And he said to them, "Can you make the friends of the bridegroom fast while the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and they will fast in those days." Then he spoke a parable to them. "No one puts a piece from a new garment on an old one,
Okay? Two things here. They asked about why do your disciples not fast and don't pray like John's does say. Says they fast often. It's said that usually the scribes and Pharisees, they'd fast at least twice a week. Is what the commentators say. And they're wondering why Jesus' disciples didn't. Well, he relates it back to a bridegroom. If a groom is having his wedding, you wouldn't want to feast or you wouldn't want to fast on your wedding day, would you? Okay, because that's when you're supposed to be happy, you're supposed to be celebrating, you're supposed to be doing all these things. And that's what he's saying. He was like the bridegroom to them. I'm here. They are trying to absorb all that I can give them. Later, they will fast. When I'm not with them, they will fast and they will pray like the others. But right now, I'm trying to teach them how to do that and how to get along with this. Then he goes on to another parable about taking new garments, putting on, you have a patch, your jeans are ripped, okay? They're old, you put a new patch on it. First of all, it's going to be different colors if you don't match it exactly. Second of all, if one is new and one's old and you don't sew it right, it'll rip again, tear it loose. The new is not as stretchy as the old. And then he goes about into talking about the wineskins. Wineskins, you have old and new wineskins, meaning that the old ones have been aged. And a wineskin is just a goat skin, what it is, that's a skin of a goat that they've lashed into a carrying utensil. And if it gets old, what does leather do? It dries up and it'll crack and it'll burst. What he's saying is that you're not going to put new wine in an old wineskin, because what happens with the new wine? It ferments. When you put grape juice in there and let it go through that process, it starts effervescing, starts making, and it expands and it makes pressure, builds up pressure. That's going to tear an old wineskin. Okay? So you want to take the new wine and put it in a new wineskin. Now that's what I've heard for years and years and years, and that's right. I heard a commentator today, two commentators, as a matter of fact, say that what he was trying to say, I'm coming and I'm changing the rules, and you guys aren't liking it, and it's tearing you guys apart. They want the old wine. They've tasted the old wine. They know how it tastes. They know it. They don't want to try this new stuff. It's not good. It's like, if it's not what I've had my daddy had, it ain't any good. And that's what they want. And that was, to me, a revelation. I'm like, yeah, that's what he's teaching, because that goes right on with what he taught earlier about the Gentiles coming in. It's not just these scribes and Pharisees, what they've been teaching all along. They're not going to get it because they're set in their ways. That's what he's telling them to their face. And they didn't get it. They didn't get it. Some of them did. A few of them, like we said before, a few of them got that and understood what he was trying to do was different. They're following the letter of the law, but what Jesus wanted them to do was follow the heart of the law. And that's what he tells them later on. I'll write it on your heart. I'll write the law on your heart. To me, that was just eye-opening. I mean, it was something I'd read, and I'm just like, okay, I didn't get that. But he has told them that before, and he will tell them that later, too. But that's just, to me, I just thought that was really neat. Any questions? Comments?
I love that last bit part where it said, we shouldn't accept or reject anything simply because it was so hard.
That's right. That's what it means, that just because it's different than what we have done it, that the way we've done it all along, the way mom and dad did it, the way all this, that's the right way. It may not be the right way. It doesn't, and a lot of times it don't even matter. It's just, are you doing it? So, all right, appreciate everybody coming out.